Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Moms at Work Speaker Series. I have a very special guest coming to us from the United States, and I'm going to let Alana just do a quick intro.
Hi, I'm Alana Karen, and I live in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and I work at Google. I've worked there for about 19 years now, so various roles, but currently in search in program management. So that's how we help engineers get things done, basically. And I wrote a book, yes, that we're going to talk about a bit more, but it's called The Adventures of Women in Tech, How We Got Here and Why We Stay.
Great. And so this is sort of, I always tell people, I'm like, there's lots of different books written about tech, but this one's a bit unique because it talks about women's experiences. So why did you start writing this book? Did you wake up one morning and are like, I'm going to write a book?
A little bit. I think it was more of like a creeping feeling, because what had happened was that it was a few years ago, and I was thinking about how I always thought careers were in phases and like what was my next phase.
Right.
And so I was thinking a little bit about what I hadn't gotten done yet that I liked doing, and like what hadn't I gotten a chance to do. And it made me think about writing, which I'd done a lot in college and when I was younger, but just hadn't had time for with a career and children. And so I just gave myself the goal that I would start to post more on LinkedIn, and I would post articles. And I posted an article series that was really about how I grew up at Google and the performance feedback I received along the way that helped shape me. And the people's reactions to that, I think, really spurred the book, because I saw that some of the stuff where I really dug into like why I had hangups or what was difficult or what were the issues were really interesting to people. And it made me think about how there just wasn't a ton of that out there when you look at books. Definitely there's like more women's groups out there now, Facebook groups, things like this, absolutely, to help share. But when you looked at books, they were all about kind of CEOs. And so, yeah, it just spurred me, and I went and I interviewed 80 women and I wrote the book.
There we go. And so do you want to walk us through sort of what the book discusses, right? Because you spend a lot of time interviewing people. So what are sort of the things that the book talks about?
Yeah, the book has three primary parts. And I think it was because it was what I was interested in, but it seems to be interesting to others too. The first part is about how we really do come from anywhere. When I was interviewing women, they had extremely diverse backgrounds. A lot of them hadn't even thought they would end up in tech and did. They were both in technical roles and non-technical roles. And they just had, just in every way, the rainbow, like of things that made them different ambitions. And so I cover a lot of that and the different personalities and how everybody is needed in tech, basically.
Right. And then that was a good point, because we hear a lot of women who don't even bother, right? Because they say this is this industry and I don't want to be a part of it, and I don't need to be the only woman in the office. So what do you say to women who are thinking that about tech?
Well, I think there's a variety of experiences in tech at this point. And I still think that the way the media covers it paints it a little bit just like, oh, it's just going to be bros. Like it's going to be very male dominated. It's going to be this environment or that environment. And I would say at this point, it's actually really super diverse. You have everything from small startups up through very large companies. Right. All types of roles, right? So a lot of what's pictured too, I think, is like just the engineering environment.
Yeah.
That isn't portrayed totally correctly, but you have HR teams, you have finance teams, you have sales teams, right? So, and the diversity is really going to vary across companies and teams. I spoke with women who never really felt, they worked in HR, never really felt like one of the challenges was that they were the only woman. They were in fact in women dominated places. Right. So yeah, I would say investigate a little bit more. You may still be right. It may not be a fit for you for whatever reason. But I think that at this point, it's really evolved past how people classically think of it or how it's been portrayed. And there's a ton of opportunity there. So I wouldn't dismiss it outright.
Right. And your career has spanned almost 20 years at Google. Have you seen a lot of changes in tech, like from the beginning to now? I think most people are just sort of coming round to tech, that this is a fairly new thing, and it's not. It's been around for a long time, and so I think that's quite an interesting stance for people, because they don't realize how long, like, Google has been around.
Yeah, we're getting kind of old, actually.
Yeah, well, but it's.
All right, maybe I'm just speaking personally. Anyway, I think that certainly it's evolved in lots of different ways. And of course, I was at a company that I joined when there were about 300 people, and now it's over 100,000 people. So my experience is going to be like very specific to that. But just, the number of companies, the number of ideas, the number of applications for technology. So if you're not into the internet, that may be fine, but there's all kinds of things out there. Are you interested in how technology is furthering the medical field, how it's helping traditional industry, right? Like, there's all these aspects now that have evolved over time. And also, of course, technology companies' mindfulness about, trying to be diverse and not believing that the true meritocracy just works all the time without, being mindful of things like unconscious biases and et cetera. So I think that, it's certainly evolved. There are things I think that are still very similar, most of them lovely, right? Like the spirit of innovation and an appetite to challenge things and have new ideas and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it really has changed quite a bit.
So let's say we have some women who are watching who are saying, I really want it. I want to get into tech, but I don't really know where to start. Knowing that tech now is hugely diverse, from a 2-person startup to 100,000 person Google. In my work, I usually tell people to go for the company rather than the industry, right? Because there's just such huge diversity. But are there ways that women can learn more about it without, like, before applying, finding about industry, finding companies that sort of match? Like, where are people coming to you from when they're applying?
They're coming in from all over the place, really, because, it's people have had really varied careers. They may just be leaving university, or they may be 30 years out, have mainly worked in, name it, fields, and now they've seen a role that piques their interest. Or sometimes they're even just looking for the stability of technology if their industry is not as stable anymore. So it can really vary. And what I would say is that there has to be sort of an appetite for learning, because technology is a place that there is a ton of information now, and it changes a lot, and it moves pretty rapidly. And so I would start off first by just taking in some of the information and see whether it intrigues you and you're into it, right? Read some of articles, see and pay attention, like which articles interest you and which ones bore you. Because I think it's such a big field. And if you're trying to read an article about, something related to technology and genetics, and you're just not into it, well, move on then, right? Like, that's not going to be your thing. Maybe don't look into biotech.
Skip that one.
Maybe skip that one, right? But like, say you're a technophile, like you're always buying the latest Apple, whatever. Well, then you might be really interested in a company that does hardware. And kind of pursue that interest and go on to LinkedIn and make connections with people. And it's really easy just to send a chat request and say, hey, I have these 3 questions. Would you answer them either live or via email? And just start broadening your horizons a bit and see whether ultimately you go to the job board for that company, or you start searching for, like, based on the people's roles that I've chatted with, I am most interested in product management. And then you start looking for product manager roles and you go from there. I will say there's now a ton of information out there. There's training courses, there's all this kind of stuff that wasn't around. There's moms in tech group on Facebook, there's women in tech groups on Facebook, there's like all kinds of groups. And so the pro of that is that you'll be able to find your way, whether you know people in tech or not. The con of it is that just a ton out there. Right. So, pick and choose and move on if you're not interested.
And one of the main takeaways from your book was that women belong in tech, right? That was like an overarching takeaway, was that you're very adamant that women belong here. And in fact, it's important that they're in tech. Having seen the increase in women in tech, have you noticed any sort of major shifts, just because there are more women now in tech and now women are moving into leadership roles, right? Like, at a pace that we didn't see before.
I noticed differences. I think just the amount of mindfulness and conversation and trainings available online or for managers at your company or whatever it is just like, we did not talk about unconscious bias even 10 years ago. Like, it's just been a very swift rise. And this year with the talk more about systemic injustices, that conversation is very new and has certainly shifted quite a bit. And I think that it can't be under credited to the presence of a lot of minoritized populations pushing that conversation along with very strong allies. Right. So I think that has been a huge presence felt. But also I think like the products in the market are really shifting bit by bit. And especially this year, challenged by a global pandemic, just really part of the real win of getting diversity in tech is making sure that you're building products that address the world. Right. And so when you look out at the startup field now, you see it's not just like the latest watch. It's really companies trying to figure out, well, how do you apply some of this technology to finance and really change who's financed in the world? And how would that change the economy and people's ability to advance over generations in their family? Right. So there's just like a lot more. I think what we thought of as tech, which was like a silicon chip or like whatever it was, like it was literally a silicone chip, has just really evolved now to how do you change the world and how do you take technology and apply it to things that really make it better. And so if you assume technology is just hardware or a chip or the race to get everyone's information, it might turn you off. If you think about the thing that's important to you and you ask, how does technology apply to that? That's a lot of what I've seen evolving as we get more people into tech. And that's why I think it's just so important. I also state that we belong here because there's still a lot of imposter syndrome for women in tech. Yes. And I want any woman reading the book to just have a supportive book they can always go back to be like, right, I belong here.
Right. And I think that's like a really important topic that people who are not in tech is realizing, especially more than ever, because women used to shy away from it, at least women I worked with, because you see the engineering team, you see the hardware, all of those teams. And really tech has diversified into, food security, right? How to prolong shelf life of food, literally you could name a topic and there's going to be a company doing it. So just like you talked about before, instead of viewing it as sort of like women getting into tech, it's like, look at the topics that excite you, because I guarantee you there's going to be a company out there who's trying to do it, right? Or is funding a company that's trying to do it, or those types of things. And that's a much different interview when you walk in and you're super excited about the product and supporting the product rather than just trying to get a job, right? Whether you're a woman or a man, and going for it. So we have a lot of women in our group. Most women are like mid to senior career. And you've talked a lot about women shifting into tech. And any sort of tips for women who are coming from, we've got a lot of marketers or HR who aren't in tech and who are very interested because tech is doing new and exciting things across the board, right? It's the opportunity to do something different. Other than like learning a lot about the company, is there any sort of things, from your experience that you look for candidates who may not have experience but want to get into tech? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the real trick tends to be is that most people who interview are not really good, or even who are screening resumes,
Yep.
are not really good at translating your experience to the job description.
Right.
You think we should be better at this, but we're just not.
Yeah.
It's reading comprehension at its base, and we're just not all like there.
Right.
And so that's like a certain art, and most people don't have it. So just assume that and spoon feed us.
Okay.
So when you are trying to make any job pivot, even if you're within tech and just trying to leap to another type of role or whatever,
right,
think about your core competencies,
okay,
the things that you bring to the table, your core skills, and abstract it from your industry for the most part, right? Like, say that you negotiate contracts and
sure,
your negotiation skills are very strong.
okay.
So make sure that that's coming through in your resume, whether you have a skills section up top or you have a section up top that really like screams what you're about and you're good about, like that little personal summary section.
Yep.
Make sure that as you write your job descriptions that you're not writing it in industry, you are making it translatable, right? Like, I negotiated over 5,000 contracts for, X size companies, right? And then when you go to the interview, be prepared to do the same thing, right? Yeah. As you're answering those questions, break them down and make them understandable. Because really what's happening, and I think a lot of times when people feel kind of blocked out of tech, is just a little bit of like language translation problem,
right?
Where you come in and you have a ton of experience and it's totally cool and relevant, and then you leave wondering why they didn't see it.
Right.
And there is going to be, I would say the onus is on you at that point to break it down and do that. So you can practice a little bit again, whether it's through LinkedIn or through groups that you're part of or whatnot. Use it, finding support to help you practice that conversation a little bit, or even just look over points that you've written and say like, hey, does this, would you buy this?
And the other thing I tell people is that, like, if you're applying for a secretary job, and you don't need to tell me what a secretary does, because that's what people end up doing. They're like, I did filing, I did whatever. You need to tell us how you did it and what makes you different. So just like you said, instead of saying I was responsible for filing, you say I was responsible for filing 5,000 pieces a day, or give some context to it, right? I think people miss the context.
I work at high volume, right? Right. Like I deal with difficult people. Like I negotiate conflict, right? So yeah, you're looking really for the skills, the skill set, not the task.
Right.
And yeah, because now maybe the job purely is filing and you're going to filing and you'll be fine. And it's just, I will say, like, some of these things are very translatable right off the bat, just from core operations tasks. If you've done, warehousing for one industry and then you're going to move to warehousing for another, it's could be very similar. But yeah, just watch out for that translation aspect.
Yeah, and I think people don't recognize that. I think they're very focused on trying to like match the job description, and then you're not left with a whole lot to go on, right? If they're just making it very basic. So that's excellent. So for people who are looking to switch, it's not about shifting, to get the lingo and all of that other thing. That's the other thing I find is people try to like overuse weird terms to make it seem like they have the like lingo. And I was like, that's not helping anybody. So that's exactly it. Like a knowledge transfer from one industry to another is quite similar.
Certainly do some reading, know what the company is about. If you can use the product, use the product.
Right.
But I think that usually it's a bit more of you're going to get questions like, tell me about a time that you had two team members who didn't get along and what you did. Right. You're going to get questions like that. And so really thinking through and being able to say, oh, okay, well, that's usually about not having alignment at something core and different motivations and what goes on there and how you would approach that. That's a little bit more what ends up happening in a lot of these interviews. Right. And I think that, yeah, over indexing on like some technical information may not help you.
And so most of the interview processes now are like, how many steps are we looking at?
Well, that's really going to vary between companies. I would say generally, though, there's usually a step where you're trying to get your resume seen.
Yep.
And either a recruiter, a sourcer, or even the manager themselves might be looking through either what you applied directly online or, on their website or on a, sometimes they're even just like looking at LinkedIn, sourcing people. Okay. So think about your LinkedIn profile too and making it translatable because you never know when a recruiter or a sourcer might be looking. But I think that first step of just getting to a stage where they want to talk to you, then there might be a recruiter call where they kind of vet you.
Right.
Then there's interview calls. Okay. And then you wait. And you could wait. Then you wait. And you could wait. I think people picture companies like having this like set process and you're reviewed every Tuesday or like whatever it is. And I do think some companies have that, but many companies, they're actually just debating budget for the person behind the scenes and they disappear for 6 months. Right. So, you just don't know how long you'll wait, but that is generally the process behind the scenes. There might be approval steps or whatever it is that are taking time between each thing, but that's generally what you'll go through.
Sure. So the book is now out, hardcover, ebook. Right? Can get it at any local or online.
Absolutely.
And so for everybody
putting an audiobook just came out.
Yeah. So for all those people looking to add to their book list for the holidays, this is one of those ones that you can put on there. Where can people find you? They want to follow you or follow your work.
Yeah. By the way, we never got to part 2 or part 3. So the book just has a ton more, by the way, about the challenges women go through and the skills and support that help them. So yes, definitely take a look at it. You can get it at alanakaren.com, more information about it and find booksellers for it. But also I'm on LinkedIn a lot. Okay. So look me up on LinkedIn, connect with me. Happy to chat and give more advice and support there.
Great. And we're going to put a link to buy the book and a link, would you like, and then the other links that you gave so that people can find you and follow you.
Social media. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, because you're continuing this sort of conversation. We kind of got through step 1, but step 2 and step 3 are all on her social media. And it's really important to I try and bring out like diverse voices and people who are bringing, you share articles and share information about this thing. And if this is something that you're really interested in, then this is someone you should be following so that you can start to learn more about the things that you need and sort of the systems at play. And I think it's so important that this book brings out all the different voices. Lots of people write about their specific experience, but what you've done is really bring together lots of different voices and shared experience, which is, I think, really, really important. So all of those links are below, and I will share them in the group when this goes live as well. And I hope you give her a follow, and we are excited to see what comes next.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us here in your house. I love Zoom, right? Like, thank you for inviting me into your house.
Yeah, this is the corner
of your house. That's exactly it. Great. So have a great rest of the week, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.